Perfect. Hello, everybody. I'm Celeste Landry. I'm the facilitator for the LWVCO Alternative Voting Methods Statewide Task Force, and happy to have all of you here. This meeting is being recorded, as you know. Here's our agenda for today's meeting. We're going to be talking a lot about proportional representation in every single one of these 5 bullet points. We have meeting norms which you agreed to when you signed up for this meeting. At our last meeting in January, this is what happened. And you can access past meeting videos and slide decks on our Alternative Voting Methods Task Force webpage. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties last month, and so only 30 minutes of the meeting was recorded. But we got out in time to see the moon's occultation of Mars, so that was sort of fun. Okay. We'll start with some meeting introductions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can all see each other. If I can, okay. And I'm Celeste. I'm the facilitator of this task force group. And I always love it if somebody else will work the introductions. Pat, would you? I know you have to leave early.
Okay, had to unmute myself. It wouldn't work very well to introduce people with myself muted. Hi, I'm Pat Venturo. I've been a member of the task force and the voting methods team of the Boulder League for quite a while. And this is quite an adventure. So how about Beth, because you may have to leave, you want to tell us who you are?
Thank you, Pat. I'm Beth Hendricks. I'm the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Colorado. Welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here and for your interest in this fascinating topic. Let's hand it to Tom.
Oh, hi there. I'm Tom Alley. I'm a relatively new member of the League of Women Voters in Adams County. I'm just trying to participate more in what interests me, which is alternative election systems. And I'm tuning in here. I'm not a member of this yet. Maybe I will be, but very, very interested in what's going on here.
Tom, if you're a member of a local league, you're automatically a member of the state league.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah, okay, good.
Neil?
Hi, Neil McBurnett, active in voting methods for a long time and in election integrity. And joining on my phone and not very functional today.
Hope you feel better soon.
Thanks.
Okay, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm also with the voting methods team in the Boulder League. I'm also a math professor at the University of Colorado, and I study redistricting, gerrymandering, electoral systems, cool stuff like that.
And we'll hear from you soon. Susan, how nice to see you in your new locale.
Oh, yeah. I'm Susan Saunders. I'm the co-president of the local league of Boulder County, and I'm now living in Portland, Oregon, but at least working out my term. And because Portland is involved in just what you're talking about, I'm tuning in. I don't know a whole lot, but I survived my first local election.
That's great. And we have some new folks. Karen Moscow, introduce yourself to us.
Well, I'm Karen Moscow, just new, right down below me. Martha was there for a second. She and I had conversed on things and kind of settled on what could we do and looked at this and decided here's where we'll start. I'm just a beginner, mostly listening, not talking at all.
Where are you, Karen?
Boulder, I mean Longmont.
Okay, good. I didn't say where I am. I'm in Erie. Martha?
Hi, how are you? I'm Martha Wommeldorf, and as Karen said, we are neighbors, and we have decided that perhaps we could get involved and maybe make a change here if possible. Live in Longmont as well, and I am not actually a member yet. This was intended to be a meeting to attend to kind of see how things work and get familiar with what all you are doing in particular with this topic.
Okay, great. Britta?
Non-members are very welcome. Just saying.
Thank you.
Britta?
Hi there. This is the second meeting today that I almost forgot. So I'm in the middle of supper. So that's why my screen and my camera is turned off, but I am all ears.
That's great. Robbie?
Hello, I'm Robbie Moreland in Fort Collins. I ran the ranked choice voting campaign up here for a couple years, so I'm just here to observe. Thanks for inviting me, Celeste.
You're welcome.
Okay, that's great. Well, if some other folks show up, we'll get them involved too. Celeste, back to you.
Okay, I'm just writing one last note in the chat for everybody about Longmont. Okay, now I'll go ahead and share my screen. And let's see. Wait, I want, not sure how to do this. Let's see. What do you see right now? Do you see ranked choice for Longmont?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to get to this. Okay, do you see upcoming events now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So we've done introductions. The next thing on the business part of the agenda is some upcoming events. On Tuesday, February 18th, the Colorado Voting Rights Act, which we'll hear more about today, will be heard in its first committee hearing. House State Affairs, no, sorry, Senate State Affairs, because it's an SB 25-001. So some people like Beth, who just left, will be testifying on that. The 15th of every month, pretty much, there is a PR for Proportional Representation 101 webinar that Fair Vote Canada does, and you're welcome to attend it. It's a half-hour presentation, and then they have Q&A. There goes my phone. The local leagues are doing program planning, and there's a counted out film that's going to be shown. I'm going to go to the next slide so you can read about it, but it's March 9th, 2 to 4 p.m. Whoop. Just register now. I think you can get in, or I can send you the link. Okay. Okay. Okay, thanks. Bye. That's another person who wants to get into the meeting. So Neil, do you know Chris Baum's email address? Oh, you're on your phone. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute and send him the link to this meeting. Sorry about this, everybody.
Betsy has joined us. While you're doing that, Betsy, can you tell us who you are?
Great, thank you.
Sure. Betsy McBride, calling from Idaho. Still a member of the Colorado League.
Okay, great. Okay, I will get back to the screen here. I guess
Celeste, I found my link in my alternative file, not my regular file.
that might be the same problem Chris had, and he should be joining us shortly. Okay, so on the previous screen, we talked about upcoming events. Then one of the events is in March 9th, Longmont Museum and the League of Women Voters of Boulder County is going to be hosting a film called Counted Out from 2 to 4 p.m. And there's another reason to go to Longmont. They have a Picasso art exhibit. So it's a great chance to see Picasso if you want to, and see this film. The film is about the importance of math literacy in today's world. It includes concrete examples of math's impact on democracy and justice. And then I thought I would also say that today we had a hearing on a bill to repeal the National Popular Vote Compact. Our state league opposed the bill. It failed today on an 8-2 vote with 1 excused. And as this meeting is going on, or was starting, there was another bill kind of interesting about whether we should use open source software in voting systems. And Neil may have opinions about that, but I'll just move on otherwise.
Well,
Okay.
I'm happy to say that it's a great way to save money and retain control. And there are, in fact, good open source systems coming on the market now. But I think the bill is kind of a typical bill to require it by a strict deadline and kind of make things harder for the Secretary of State. So I doubt it's going to win.
So maybe somebody could put in the chat that it's House Bill 25-1143, if people want to follow it. Pretty sure that's the number. Okay. Thank you, Neil. Our next meeting date is set for March 10th. Normally it would be the 3rd Monday, but that's St. Patrick's Day and people might want to be drinking green beer at that time or something. So we'll put it on March 10th instead, and it's always on Zoom. Okay, now our main agenda. We're going to follow up with action items. I know some people have to leave early, so I'm happy to be going fast right now because I want a lot of people to hear about Portland's city council election. So we have one action item left over from last time, which was Neil McBurnett and Ruth Grace Wong who is from the California League, are creating an online proportional approval voting option. And in the chat, Neil put some information about it. So the website that Ruth designed, yay, still has some bugs. That often happens when you have a brand new website. So we'll try to get another update in March about it. But if you want to try online proportional approval voting, you can now create a poll, an election, or you could use another poll. So for instance, this example down here, https:/vote.co/vote/46 is the poll. And then you could vote in, and then to see the results of that poll, you do the same URL, except for vote, you write results, and you can see the results. So we just got all this information yesterday and today, so I haven't had a lot of time to look at it. Neil, did you want to say anything else? I did put in the corner up here a picture of what an approval voting ballot looks like. Approval voting means you can vote for all the candidates you support, all the candidates you approve of, and the candidate or candidates with the most votes win. Proportional approval voting has an algorithm that lets the most people be satisfied with the results. And that might mean that, you know, if you might not support the most popular candidate, but enough people support that candidate who didn't support the ones who got elected that they also get a say. And Neil, go ahead and elaborate, correct me if I said something wrong.
Yeah, just 2 quick points. One is that the ballot layout is much simpler than other options. So for example, there is an algorithm called single transferable vote, which is a multi-winner form of ranked ballot voting, but ranked ballots take up a lot of space on pages and are sometimes seen as complex. So this has that advantage, but actually the main notable advantage from my perspective is that it's straightforward to audit, whereas proportional approval voting is straightforward to audit, whereas single transferable vote, which is much more widely used, is the best mathematical minds have been trying to find a good way to audit it for a long time, and it's very elusive.
Thanks, Neil. Okay, so thanks for working on that action item. And now we're gonna hear from Jen about she'll explain who's been working on this project to analyze Portland, Oregon's 2025 proportional representation city council election. I thought that I would start with-
2024, actually.
Oh, thank you. I'll fix that. Good point. I've been so good about writing 2025 whenever I need to, but first I'll show you what a ballot will look like in one of these ranked ballots. So Neil mentioned single transferable vote for a ranked ballot, and that's what was used in Portland. And here's an example of a ballot, and you fill in the bubble 1 next to your first choice, the bubble 2 in the row of your second choice. I think people know this if they're in this meeting, because this is pretty widely talked about in the voting methods world, but this results in the tabulation used results in proportional representation. And you can ask Jen all your questions about that during her presentation. But I did want to show you what an example of proportional representation versus a non-proportional result looks like. So if you've got sort of 3 groups in your population and you use a regular block method, if there are 100 votes and 40 of them are for a certain slate, this white polka dot slate, and 38 are for a green stripe slate, and 22 are for a plaid slate, under a block voting method, all the white polka dot would win. And that's not very proportional. That means more than half of the people don't have somebody representing them. So on the right-hand side, you can see a much more proportional result. So now's a good time to ask a question about this graphic if you want to. Otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing, and Jen, you're supposed to be a host now or something. So are you ready to go?
I'm ready to go with the Portland presentation. I am not finding the talking points about the Colorado Voting Rights Act that I had yesterday. So if you could maybe look for that while
I can put it up. You just a summary, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also on the Where the League Stands page. You have to go down a little bit and search for SB 001.
All right. Well, if you have that, you
I can do it.
when we get to that.
Okay.
All right. Meanwhile, let me see. My Zoom sharing is really weird. Like sometimes it'll show me all my windows and sometimes it won't let me scroll through them. And it is not letting me scroll through them right now.
And Chris, I don't know if you want to say hi while we're getting loaded up. Chris has just joined the group. Chris lives in Aurora, Arvada, Thornton, somewhere around there.
North Glen.
North Glen, that's it.
All right.
I was the affordable voting candidate, Congressional District 8 last time.
Cool. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. So how this came about, so this is some joint work that I did with Moon Duchin, who's a math professor at Cornell, and she runs a lab there called the Data and Democracy Lab, formerly known as the MGGG Redistricting Lab. And she was really the one who instigated this project. Some progressive groups in Portland contacted her about doing some after the fact analysis of this election. And then she asked me and David McCune, who's a math professor at William Jewell College, to join her. David is kind of an expert at looking for anomalies in ranked choice voting elections. He's done a lot of work looking at Scottish election data where they have both single and multi-winner ranked choice elections. So we came to this with sort of a diverse set of data analysis skills. And I should say that, like, you know, none of us are experts about the political on the ground situation in Portland. What I'm going to tell you about is basically just data analysis based on the cast vote record. And Susan, if you would like to chime in with context that I don't know at any point, please feel free to do so. I'm happy to learn more than I already know
I might.
about that. So here's a map of Portland, and Portland adopted this new system of elections for city council, and the first election with this system was in November. So the city is divided into these 4 districts or zones, and they each elect 3 city council members using single transferable vote, which Celeste said, is the proportional form of multi-winner ranked choice voting. And just here's a little bit sort of what happened. First of all, apparently ballot access was very easy. There were a tremendous number of candidates in each of these elections. 16 in Zone 1 and Zones 3 and 4 each had 30 candidates. Voters were allowed to rank up to 6. So it wasn't quite like that ballot Celeste just showed you where voters could rank all the candidates. Voters could just rank their top 6 choices. And this tells you who the winners were in each of these. And part of the focus of our particular analysis was trying to understand how well this did getting proportional representation. And a big part of that was for racial minorities. We also tried to look at groups of candidates who appeared to have similar bases of support, and did we get proportionality based on those kinds of things. So anyway, what happened here, District 1 is the most racially diverse of the 4 districts, and the winners were Candace Avalos, who identifies as Black and Hispanic, Loretta Smith, who is Black, and Jamie Dunphy, who is white. In Zone 2, Dan Ryan and Elena Pertle-Guiney are white. Samir Kanal identifies as Asian. Zone 3, Steve Novick is white, Angelita Murillo is Hispanic, and Tiffany Koyana Lane is Asian. And in Zone 4, all 3 of the winners, Olivia Clark, Mitch Green, and Eric Zimmerman, were white. So that's this slide. And I'm going to mostly focus on what happened in Zone 1 for this presentation, just because there was a lot of interesting stuff in all 4 zones, and there's not time to tell you all of it. But you know, I think Zone 1 was of particular interest because my understanding is it had not had, you know, that geographic area had not had representation on the city council under the plurality winner-take-all system. And it is the most diverse it's about, I forget, 30-odd% Black and, you know, 60-something% white. So these are the candidates. This is Candace Avalos, Steph Routh, Jamie Dunphy, Loretta Smith, Timur Ender, Terrence Hayes, and Noah Ernst. That's only 7. These were the 7 who got the most votes and crossed a threshold of viability, and I'll tell you how we set that threshold in a minute. But basically, these were out of the 16 candidates in those ones, these were the only ones who were named on enough ballots that they had any chance of winning a seat. So we focused on those candidates in each district. Each district had many sort of fringe candidates who only got a few votes, and there was no mathematical possible way they could have won a seat. Please interrupt me with questions anytime, by the way. So this is a histogram of how many ballots each candidate was mentioned on. So this is not just first place ballots. This is how many ballots was this candidate ranked in any position. And this red dotted line here is the threshold for viability. It's about 10,700 some, and that's the number of votes that you needed to win a seat. It's the total number of votes divided by 4 plus 1 is the threshold for election in a single transferable vote system. And you can see there, these are the 7 candidates who were mentioned on that many ballots, and then the other candidates who were mentioned on fewer ballots we considered not viable. because the way the transfer process works, your total score can never end up being more than the number of ballots you were mentioned on, is the reason for that threshold. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Great. So the winners, Candace Avalos was elected first, Loretta Smith was elected second, and Jamie Dunphy was elected third. So those are the winners from this district. It's maybe interesting here that Steph Routh was not elected since she had the second most mentions of any candidate, and I'm going to dive into that a little bit more later on. And this, the darker blue bars show how many first place votes each of these candidates got in the first round. So you can see that Avalos had the most first place votes, but she doesn't clear the threshold for election based on first place votes alone. She needed some transfers from other candidates as they were eliminated before she got up to that red line. And actually, as it turned out in this district, the 3 candidates who got the most first place votes did end up being the winners. That doesn't always happen. I think it happened in 3 of the 4 districts in Portland this time. I forget which one was the exception. It was either 3 or 4. But that's sort of some initial statistics about how this went. Next, I want to show you some racial demographics and vote demographics for where minority populations live in the city and where different candidates' votes were concentrated. So these are precinct maps of District 1. Here, darker colors indicate a higher Black population, and on the lower one, darker colors indicate a higher Latino population. And as you can see, there's sort of a concentrated area of Black population. The Latino population of this district is a little lower than the Black population. Okay, so let's look at where Avalos had her strongest support. Based on first place votes, this is where Avalos had her strongest support in the darkest areas. And it doesn't actually line up that well with racial demographics. We did some statistical analysis called racial polarized voting analysis to try to understand the preferences of different racial groups for different candidates. And Avalos was stronger with Hispanic voters than other candidates, but she was also just broadly popular. She was also popular with white voters. She was popular with all the minority voters. And this is why she won, was because she had very broad support. You can see that the darkest area of most support is this sort of southwest corner of the district, and that's a neighborhood called Lentz. And it's not exactly where she lives, but it's very close to where she lives. So a lot of her support was sort of geographic. Loretta Smith, on the other hand, you can see that her support actually lines up reasonably well with where the Black population is concentrated. And our analysis showed that she was the clear candidate of choice for Black voters in this district. Another way that we looked at support, since first place votes tell a lot of the story, but obviously not all the story in single transferable vote, we also scored the ballots differently using what's called a board account, where on each ballot we gave 6 points for a first place vote, 5 points for a second place vote, and so on, and tallied up those scores. And based on that score, here's what Avalos's geographic support looked like. Doesn't actually change that much. And here's what Smith's board of support looked like. So regardless of which scoring method we use, you can kind of see how their geographic regions of support were a little different, which is kind of cool. And there's that neighborhood Lentz.
So Jean, what does this tell you?
It's sort of, in addition to the racially polarized voting analysis, it's just sort of an additional piece of evidence that says if Loretta Smith's support was strongest where the Black population is highest, that's just it's not definitive by itself, but it's an additional indicator that she was probably the candidate of choice for Black voters. She was the one most strongly supported by Black voters. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Jen, didn't you say that Avalos, when I heard you give this presentation before, is from the Lentz neighborhood or near there?
She's not from that neighborhood, but I think she's from very close to that neighborhood. I think she lives basically adjacent to that neighborhood is what I was told. So it's close to being her home neighborhood. All right. One of the main things that we wanted to study was what outcomes about this election were due to the system itself, meaning what happened because we used single transferable vote versus what might have been different if we had used some other system for electing multiple candidates. So you never know how an election would have played out under an alternative system, but using the ballots we had, we tried to make some reasonable inferences. So for instance, what if we had just done vote for one? So where every voter's, the only vote that counted was their first place vote. And in that case, the winners would have been Avalos, Smith, and Dunphy, who were the same as the ones who actually won. So in this district, vote for one actually would have produced the same outcome as single transferable vote. What if you got to use vote for three? This is block plurality, right? This is the non-proportional system. Boulder uses this system to elect its city council. A lot of other cities do as well. Some cities have been sued for using this system because it is so very non-proportional. And so the way we simulated this was we just looked at every voter's top three scores, but counted them as unranked. So just said, if you got 3 votes for your, one each for your top 3, who would have won? And this would have given a different winner set. It would have elected Avalos, Ralph, and Smith. What about Condorcet? So Condorcet is a method that looks for head-to-head contests. So how many voters ranked this candidate above this candidate versus the other way around? And the Condorcet winner is the candidate who would have won all head-to-head contests. So in zone 1, Avalos was the Condorcet winner. And then if you take her out, Ralph would have defeated everybody else in head-to-head contest except Avalos. So Ralph was the Condorcet second place winner, and then Dunphy was the Condorcet third place winner. STV, of course, we saw elected Avalos.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Sure.
So we often talk about Condorcet for a single winner election. And that being, Condorcet is like the gold standard for single winner elections. That's usually what we say. However, does Condorcet even apply for proportional representation? Like,
okay, this actually is a non-proportional result that this Condorcet.
Okay, just clarifying that Condorcet is not like, it doesn't really apply for.
I am not claiming that this is a list of proportional methods, right? Vote for 3 is also very much not a proportional method.
Right. I just want people to realize that that's what's going on. Whereas vote for 1 is a semi-proportional voting method because it's called limited voting or single non-transferable vote, non-transferable vote. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And board account, which I just told you about, which nobody uses in practice, but if you had used it, it would have elected Avalos, Ralph, and Smith, the same as vote for 3. So what's going on here? What's going on is that Ralph and Dunphy had the same base of support. Voters who ranked one of them were much more likely to also rank the other than just across the ballots as a whole. And let me share, okay, this is a little bit much, but let me explain what you're seeing here. So there's sort of a legend on the side here with the names of the viable candidates. And what this is saying, if you read across the top, if I voted for this candidate, and then down the bottom, how likely is it that I also ranked this other candidate? And the green squares show positive correlation, where if I ranked this one, I'm more likely to have ranked this one. And the purple ones show negative correlation, where if I ranked this one, I probably didn't rank this other one. And so what you can see here is which groups of candidates had similar bases of support. And in particular, this square here is Ralph and Dunphy. And you see these are the darkest green squares in this whole grid. And this tells you that if I ranked either Ralph or Dunphy, I was very likely to have also ranked the other one. And so what that means is, say in a vote for 3 system, where I get to give full support to more than one candidate, that group of voters, because they had enough power to elect one candidate, in a non-proportional system, they can elect 2 candidates if they all agree on which candidates those are, and they could get more than their share of representation. And that's what happens in this Condorcet system, is because, you know, once we take out the top winner, I still get a full vote for the next winner, even if my vote counted for the first place winner. So in a non-proportional system, these sort of coalitions that have a broad base of support can get more than their share of representation. The other interesting correlation down here, this is Loretta Smith, who's the Black candidate who won, and Terrence Hayes, who was the other Black viable candidate. Hayes was eliminated, you know, fairly early. And when Hayes was eliminated, most of his support transferred to Smith. So there was a lot of mutual support among those 2 candidates also. One thing we looked at was sort of this satisfaction metric. What share of voters put one of these winners in their top 3? So like what percentage of voters would feel represented by having at least one of their favorites in the winner set? And here's what we see in this particular election. Just about all of these methods make about 71% of voters happy, which is pretty good. Condorcet is the loser here, which makes fewer people happy, because you've got a lot of people who are really happy because it elected both Routh and Dunphy. But you've got the Routh Dunphy supporters are really happy, but then the Smith supporters and other supporters are not so happy. So that's just
Jen?
so, yeah.
On that last slide, there's
Oh, sorry. Get to it. Yeah.
so you highlighted the one kind of near the bottom right, but if you go down and to the left of that, there's one with a little bit higher correlation.
Yeah, let's see. That is Timur Ender and is that Avalos? Yeah, I guess
Smith.
that's Avalos and I
Looks
don't
like
have the last
Smith,
one.
but maybe I can't see it well enough. If they're in order.
You mean the one that's 0.15 here?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
0.20 in the other corner? Let's see. That is Avalos and Ender. I mean, part of what's going on here is everybody liked Avalos.
No, I'm talking about Smith and Ender. It's a box that's just down and to the left, I think.
So Smith and Ender is minus 0.04. That's anti-correlated. Oh no, sorry, that's Hayes and Ender. Smith is 11 and Ender is 14. Now those are negative correlations.
Wait, then I'm misunderstanding something. We have to go. So the lower left 0.15 is already showing.
That's if you voted for Candace Avalos, how likely are you to have voted for Timur Ender?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else before I go on to the next slide? Okay.
Wasn't there another, are you going to talk about another, or maybe you're getting to that?
Yeah, hang on.
Okay.
So here's the actual winner sets. And one thing that we asked was, out of that voter satisfaction metric, would there be a winner set that would make a larger percentage of voters happy? So this is a little bit like what proportional approval voting tries to get at. Not exactly the same, but it turns out that if you take Dunphy out and replace him with Noah Ernst, this winner set would have a 75% support. But there's no major voting rule that would find this winner set, at least given the ranked ballots that we have to work with. So that was just kind of an interesting side note. All right, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of show you how this election played out. So the threshold for election was 10,718 votes. And in round one, this is the number of first place votes that each of the viable candidates had. It took 10 rounds to eliminate the non-viable candidates. And after they were all eliminated, their votes transferred to viable candidates. So this is what the vote totals look like for the viable candidates once all the non-viable candidates had been eliminated. So now we start eliminations we can actually see. Nobody is at the threshold yet. So we eliminate the candidate with the most votes. And for now, that's Ender. So Ender is out.
Fewest votes.
Right, fewest votes, thank you. And Ender's votes will transfer to the next candidate ranked on them. And after those votes are transferred, here's what it looks like. And you can see a lot of Ender's votes transferred to Avalos. She's almost at quota now, but not quite. Well, next fewest votes is Ralph. So now Ralph is out, and Ralph's votes transfer. And watch how many of them transfer to Dunphy, but also a lot to Avalos, right? So basically the three of them, Avalos was popular with everybody, but the voters who liked Ralph and Dunphy also very much liked Avalos. They were sort of the progressive slate, those three. And this is
where is Ender on this?
What?
Where is Ender on this?
Ender wasn't Ender the one eliminated here? Yes.
Could be. I wasn't paying attention. So
Yeah, Ender was the first viable candidate eliminated.
got it. Thanks.
And then we've now eliminated Steph Routh. And after transferring, Avalos now is elected. So she's the first winner. And now the next thing that happens is we take her surplus, that green bar, and a fraction of every vote that Avalos has right now, corresponding to that fraction of her total votes, transfers to the next candidate on their list. So when her excess is distributed, you saw a lot of it went to Dunphy. It doesn't get to go to Ralph anymore because she's out. So if Ralph was the next person mentioned, it would skip her also and go to the next person who's still active. All right. Nobody else is at quota yet, so it's time to eliminate somebody. Ernst is the next one out. So Ernst is gone. When his votes transfer, they transfer like that.
I find it very interesting how close some of these elimination rounds are.
Some of them are very close, yeah.
Wow.
Now we still have nobody at quota, and Hayes now has the fewest votes, and you're going to see that now most of Hayes's excess is going to transfer to Smith. So she achieves quota in this round. And now her excess will be transferred. And Dunphy's the only one left. And now here's something interesting happened. We're done, right? There's nobody else to eliminate. There's only 3 candidates left. Dunphy doesn't quite make quota because a lot of the ballots have been exhausted, are not still active, but that's okay. He's the last one standing, so he's the 3rd person elected.
So I don't know if everybody here knows how a ballot gets exhausted. There are 2 ways. One is you don't rank your entire ballot. Here you are allowed to rank 6 candidates and you don't rank your entire ballot, and all your candidates are eliminated. And so then your ballot becomes exhausted. The other way your ballot can become exhausted is if you rank the entire ballot, but you rank candidates. There were 16 candidates here or 17 candidates, something like that. You rank all the ones who are not viable, and then your ballot gets exhausted early in the process. And then, so those are the 2 ways you can have an exhausted ballot.
Right. Yeah, so this can happen. I think District 1 was the only district in which somebody was elected without meeting the threshold. So yeah, that's how it went. I should say, I understand there was a big education campaign in Portland to encourage people to use the full list of rankings, and it worked very well. So, well over 40% of voters in every district ranked 6. And that was the most common ballot length. And the next most common ballot length was 3, where voters, figured there's 3 to be elected. I'll tell you who my top 3 were. So voters in Portland did a very good job of using the full expressiveness that was available to them in this election.
But not all the voters.
That's
voted.
about all I have to say there. So I think I'm done.
Yeah.
But I'm happy
I
to
had a
answer
couple
questions.
questions in chat.
Susan wanted to say something. She was trying to say something just now.
Oh, sorry, Susan. Yeah.
I was just going to say, but a lot of voters did not vote. The council voting was pretty good. When you look at what they did with the mayor, people just threw up their hands and didn't fill out that part of the ballot at all.
Interesting.
Because there were so many candidates, it was hopeless. I went to 2 forums, the same 6 out of, I don't know, 20 or so candidates were there. Nobody else either was invited or participated. So I feel like you run the risk of having too many people in, and it just
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's everybody's mind to
it
make
was
that
very
big.
interesting to us that there were
Yeah.
this many candidates.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that says something about how easy Portland chose to make it to get on the ballot. Maybe it says something about just this was the first time that this method was being used in Portland, and so there was
Right.
a lot
That's
of
something I
enthusiasm.
wonder is, as a geographical area gets more familiar with the process, then maybe it isn't going to be so daunting. And maybe you won't have as many just wild cards.
Yeah.
But again, I am also thinking of the mayoral race.
Yeah, and we didn't look at that one at all. They
If
just
you look
wanted
at
us.
those counties, like I happen to be in District 4, which is one of the 30 candidate
Yeah.
districts.
You know, one of the
There's
things
no
we
way
worried
there was gonna be a forum for all those
One of
people.
the things we worried about was that with so many candidates, would it just be completely chaotic? But it actually wasn't. Like there were 30 candidates in District 4, but only 8 of them met the viability threshold. So, you know, so it ended up being not as chaotic, at least the results didn't look as chaotic as we thought they might have. I know nothing about the process on the ground during the election. But even in District 4, we were pretty happy with how it came out. It was a little bit disappointing in District 4 that all the viable candidates were white. There were some minority candidates who weren't viable, but Mitch Green was the very clear candidate of choice of minority voters. So it did still look like, even though no minority candidates were viable, the minority population did get a candidate of choice elected in District 4, which was good.
Yeah, right. So,
That's it.
maybe we just have to keep plugging away at this. and
Yeah.
Tell
I mean,
people understand it, and it's second nature to them.
Yeah. Well, other encouraging signs were that the ballot error rate was pretty low. Like it was comparable to what David has seen in his studies in Scotland. And he looked in Scotland where, like, you know, towns where they first started using single transferable vote. And then in subsequent elections, the error rate went down as voters got used to it. And the voter rate, you know, the error rate was less than 1%. For ballots that were just, I mean, Portland was very generous actually in how it counted. Like if you made a mistake with your first choice ranking, they would just skip over it and go, but still count your next choice ranking where you cast a valid ranking. And not everybody does that. Alaska is much more strict. As soon as you mess up one rank, they throw out the rest of your ballot, and that's an administrative choice. So Portland was pretty generous.
Wonder how effective this would be or successful it would be if you're not talking mail-in ballots or ballots where somebody has time to sit at the dining room table and figure this out over a couple of weeks, instead of, oh my God, I got to stand here in this booth and, you know.
In Cambridge, Massachusetts, they've been using this single transferable vote method since 1941, and most people vote in person. And you go to the polling place, they give you one sheet for city council, a separate sheet for school committee. Some people don't take the school committee one because they don't have kids, they don't know what's going on with the schools, but they're offered both of them. And then you fill in the bubbles, and they give you a ruler so that you can make sure you've lined up the bubbles correctly, because they used to allow, the year I was there for a month, they had 26 candidates running for city council. You could rank 26 candidates. Now they've limited it to 15, which seems reasonable. Yesterday, my husband was thinking that if you're electing 3 candidates per zone or ward, I'm not sure, or district or zone, I'm not sure what they call it there, but I thought it was district, but you used the word zone.
Well, I should say Moon made these slides for a talk she gave a few weeks ago, and I think she called them zones on the slides, but we've been calling them districts in the
Okay.
write-up.
And that's what Susan called it. Anyway, so if you have, if you're electing 3 per district, my husband who grew up in Cambridge, his thought was you should allow like 9, 9 rankings at least, or, you know, like more than twice as much. But I think that the thinking is twice as much as plenty. And for Cambridge, where you elect 9 council members, you can only rank 15. That's not twice as many as the number that get elected. So I think it works fine.
Okay.
Betsy and Neil have their hands up.
I'm not finished. I have a question too. But Betsy, why don't you go? And then I'll ask my question.
So do you divide by 4 because there are 4 districts?
No, you divide by 4 because you're electing 3 candidates. You're electing 3 seats. So think about it this way. When we elect one person, how much do you need to win? You need half the votes plus a little more.
Right.
Right? So now say you want to elect 2 people. Each winner needs a third of the votes plus a little bit. Because you can't have more than 2 people get a third plus a little bit.
Right. Okay.
Right? So when you're electing 3, everybody needs a fourth plus a little bit. And the little bit is counted as 1 vote. So you take the total number of votes, divide it by 4, and add 1. And that's the threshold that you need to get elected.
So, okay, so each district elected 3. Did the number 3 come from Portland had decided how big their council
Yes.
was?
This was a decision that Portland made when they changed to this system, was that the city council would have 12 members elected, for 3 each from 4 districts.
Okay, thank you.
This was their first election using this new system. So it had a lot of attention from the world. Is it my turn?
Either you or Neil.
Okay. Susan, I wanted to ask you, you said only 6 candidates showed up at those forums. Did one of those 6 end up getting elected?
In the mayoral race, yes.
Okay. Yeah. I want to reward people who show up. So, you know, knowing nothing else about the candidates except that, I'm happy about that. You were talking about how many candidates were running, and this was also an issue in Minneapolis, in Alaska, and those places saw decreases in the number of candidates in the subsequent elections, and some of them may have been they changed the ballot access to make it a little bit harder to get on the ballot, but they still have plenty of candidates who run for certainly the high file offices. And then did Jen, did you say that you have a report on all of the 4 districts?
Oh, yeah. So the idea was that we wrote a fairly comprehensive report, which I should say is still in draft stage because Moon is still in the process of sharing it with the groups that we're working with. And, you know, they may want us to make some minor changes to the report or this or that. So it's not finalized yet. I don't know when it will be publicly available, but it will be eventually. And also David and I are planning to write an academic article with essentially the same analysis in it. So there's lots more to say. We did analyses like this for all 4 districts, and I didn't really talk about the statistical analysis we did for the racially polarized voting. So if you really want to see this, there will be a much more detailed report sometime, but not quite yet.
Neil?
Thanks. So given the observation that there were some tight margins in the eliminations, there are two things that come up for me out of that. One is I have heard it said by people who are very smart that the MEEK, M-E-E-K, MEEK STV algorithm does surplus transfers a little bit differently. It does them in a more symmetrical way. And I'm just wondering if you have looked at the results for that method. And it's possible
I have
that that would
not,
be different.
but I know, David, who's looked at a lot of these stuff, I know he has also said that he likes Meek a lot.
And what you use right now, or what Portland used, was something like weighted Gregory inclusive method or something.
God, I don't know.
Something like that, I think. Okay.
Yeah,
It was just fractional transfer. I think if it had come up, they would have done simultaneous transfer rather than one at a time transfer, but I don't think it came up in this election when you have two people achieve quota at the same time. It can matter whether you transfer one at a time or together.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So, I think it might be worthwhile running the MEEK numbers on these ballots and just see if that's, a way to understand both MEEK and this election a little bit better.
Yeah.
The other point with the tight margins is how to do a risk limiting audit of the election. And so I have both the question, was there any kind of audit looking at the ballots and interpretations and so on with this election, because we can't trust computers, as our Colorado election position says. And, if so.
I don't know, Susan, do you know if there's any auditing that happens?
I do not. I haven't lived here long enough to know.
Yeah, I mean, the tricky thing about,
you could say we audited it in the sense that we took the cast ballot record and processed it according to Portland's rules, and we got the exact same numbers that they did.
Yeah, that's an important thing to do, as you will remember from the Alameda, California election, in which they actually published and certified the wrong result. Right. And had a lot of egg on their face when they went backwards. But beyond that, there's a question of, was there anything, were there any mismarked or misinterpreted ballots? And the issue with single transferable vote is, since the order of elimination is all important, there are, for 30 candidates, there are 30 factorial different sequences in which the actual ballots might have been eliminated, which is an astronomical number. And, there are probably some techniques to make it a little better, but honestly, the very best people in the world on this have been stumped for years, and I doubt that they'll find an efficient way to actually get what we do in Colorado, which is a risk limiting audit of this kind of election. And so that's back to kind of the proportional approval voting and how it both is easy to audit and find the margins, and also has a ballot that is just the same ballot that you're all used to now. You just say yes or no, essentially approve or disapprove on every candidate. And so it doesn't take up more space and voter time and confusion.
Yep, all true. Tom, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I had the same question as Neil about if there was an audit, but I have a different question too. Susan, you said that there were a huge number of mayoral candidates. I'm curious how many there were, and I'm wondering what method was used to elect the mayor. Was it just regular plurality?
It was instant runoff voting, single winner ranked choice.
Oh, it was?
Mm-hmm.
And how many?
I think there were, can't remember exactly. I think there were like 18.
18. Interesting.
How many were you allowed to rank for mayor?
I'm guessing 6 also, right?
Yeah, it was 6.
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah, the thing that struck me about it was that prior to the actual election, there was sort of zero potential for meeting the whole group or even a large portion of the group. And I thought that was problematic. So.
I'll be really interested to hear sort of what were the lessons learned and what gets tweaked for next time.
I don't know.
And I'm interested, I mean, you don't have a before and after to do a comparison, Susan, but people who are used to electing at large and thinking about all the candidates now for their city council, not mayor, they still thought at large for mayor, but for city council, they still had to, they only had to think about their district. And I wonder what people's reflections are on the difference before and after. I don't know if you have any observations.
Haven't had any of those kind of discussions.
Okay.
Yet. So.
I mean, I should say, as far as from the point of view, you know, not just in District 1, but citywide, how did STV do at achieving proportional representation? It seems to have done very well, both for racial representation, for ideological representation. You know, if what you wanted was more diverse, you know, obviously the district system gives you better geographical representation. You know, regardless of how you feel about the particular individuals who were elected, if, you know, the system did what it was supposed to do in terms of electing a diverse group of candidates.
But you can have diversity and not representation. You know what I mean? I mean, you also think, Jen, that not only was it diverse, but it was also representative of
Yeah, I do. So
will of the
things like
electorate.
in District 1, the fact that only one of Ralph and Dunphy got elected. I mean, I'm sure that Steph Ralph feels that she was cheated because, you know, there were certainly alternative systems under which she would have won a seat and she didn't. But in terms of that group of voters getting about the amount of representation proportional to their numbers, it worked pretty well.
Tom, do you still have your hand up? Okay. Anything else we want to say about Portland? Neil, do you want to use the cast vote records in Portland to try the Meek STV?
Sounds great to me.
Talk to me, because the original CVRs were in kind of a overwhelmingly repetitive form, but we cleaned them up. So I've got nice cast vote records for you.
Populist opportunity by not going
I
to
love a
war.
copy.
Yeah, so shoot me an email. I can send you what we've got.
Thank you.
But they did post them publicly on their county website just a couple of weeks after the election. They were very transparent.
Okay, so
But not during the election? Did they do it before certification?
No, they went. I think they certified like December 9th and posted them right after that.
Ooh, that means they don't know if they got the right answer, although you say they do, but again, probably after certification. That's problematic. Because people, honestly, I have a colleague who's a real expert in overseas election integrity with these ranking methods. And he says that he has looked in great detail at the implementations versus the laws in many, many countries. And the implementation has never, in his experience, actually implemented exactly what the law required to be implemented in terms of all the weird stuff, like what happens if there's, you know, a skipped ballot or an overvote or, you know, a write-in with this and that. So I
am pleased to report that as far as we can tell, Portland followed their published rules with all that.
That's good.
Because we implemented tallying procedure, taking them at their word for how they were counting ballots, and we got the same numbers they got.
That's great. Thank you.
okay, shall we move on to the next topic on the agenda? I will start sharing my screen again. That's not what I wanted.
But interesting.
Okay, so the next thing is talking about the Colorado Voting Rights Act. It also calls for proportional representation as we'll get into that a little bit. It's called Senate Bill 25 for the year 2025-001, which means any bill that has the number 1 is a very high priority bill. And Jen was going to go over the summary, but I'm going to point out a few things about the bill that apply specifically to voting methods. This bill would add Article 47, the Colorado Voting Rights Act, to Title I elections. And the reason Colorado wants to do this is because we're a little worried that the National Voting Rights Act is going to be eviscerated. So we're, Jen, isn't it correct that most of the language comes basically straight from the National Voting Rights Act?
That most of it does. There's been a big coalition of groups working on drafting this, and it definitely wants to, preserve some of the same rights that are in the Federal Voting Rights Act, but there's also some Colorado specific stuff and some things that are intended to head off at the pass some of the things that the Supreme Court has been doing to the Federal Voting Rights Act.
The thing that impacts voting methods most is this complaint of voter dilution, and a way to prevent voter dilution is to change the voting method. And so here, this page 12 talks about, defines an alternative method of election. It means a method of electing candidates to a legislative body of the state or a political subdivision other than a winner-take-all at-large method or a district-based method. And it's very important that when you talk about at-large methods being bad, you talk about winner-take-all at-large methods being bad, because you can have at-large methods which are proportional, as they do in Portland, where they have 3 at-large in a district running elected. And it's interesting because the text right now for this bill includes some non-winner take all methods. Cumulative voting used a lot in the South, limited voting, mixed member proportional representation, which is a party-based system, party list proportional representation, and instant runoff voting, that's basically a typo.
I and other people have screamed bloody murder about that one.
Yeah.
That is on the list of things to be amended.
I'm so happy to hear that,
transferable vote.
because I was going to testify myself on that one point, if nothing else, if it's not.
Andrea Wilkins is already on that, and
Great.
other folks also. I like, there's a list of proposed amendments, and
Great.
I like that never should have been IR.
And Andrea Wilkins is the state league lobbyist. So we talked about some of these voting methods in previous meetings. If you want to go back and see the January 13th slides and video, or the January 16th task force meeting, you can see examples of some of these voting methods. And I think that takes us to, do you want me to share the screen of the
Yeah, that'd be great.
summary? Okay, and in the chat, I put down how you can find this. So
Okay.
is that big enough for everybody to see?
Oh, if you could zoom it a little bit, it would be great. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, why don't you scroll down to the key provisions, because we're running a little short on time. All right, so what's going on with the Voting Rights Act? The Voting Rights Act is largely what it sounds like. It's trying to guarantee that people have the right to vote and that they have the right for their vote to count. It's the Federal Voting Rights Act is what gets used a lot in lawsuits about racial gerrymandering, about minority communities claiming that they don't have the ability to elect candidates of choice the way they're supposed to, and the Voting Rights Act is supposed to protect the rights of minority populations to vote and be heard and to achieve representation. In the process of being gradually dismantled by the U.S. Supreme Court, and Colorado is not the first state to look into adopting a state-level Voting Rights Act. So it prohibits political subdivisions from actions that result in or intended to result in voter suppression. So voter suppression is things like making it hard to vote, you know, somehow preventing people from accessing the ability to vote. And vote dilution is things like gerrymandering, where you get to cast a vote, but you don't have a realistic expectation that your vote will matter. Or that your
Isn't vote dilution also winner take all elections?
Can be.
Okay.
Winner take all elections are not necessarily vote dilution just by virtue of being winner take all. You know, vote dilution, I think in the law has a pretty specific, you know, there's got to be some cohesive group. You know, usually racial and language minorities are the primary groups that this has traditionally covered in the Federal Voting Rights Act. And if they are not able to elect, you know, if they vote cohesively, if they have clear candidates of choice as a group that are typically different from the candidates that that a white majority prefers, and the minority never gets to elect candidates of choice, and the white minority gets to elect all their candidates, then that's vote dilution.
Does your Portland study, like, how do they define what they think the target community would want? Do they assume that Blacks would want to vote for Blacks, or do they take into account?
No, there is no assumption. You have to look at past elections and do some complicated statistics called a racially polarized voting analysis, where you try to infer based on precinct level voting results and precinct level demographics what different racial groups tended to prefer and how strong those preferences were.
Great.
And there's some I mean, I'm not going to say that they're perfect, but there are some accepted statistical techniques for doing this.
Betsy, do you still have your hand up? I can't see because.
So does the revised statutes already allow increased access changes? And my second question is, who's going to decide if a change is voter suppression?
Same way it is now, by lawsuits. So the courts get to decide.
Terrible.
So if you know if a group feels that they are being suppressed or having their votes diluted, they hire a lawyer and file a lawsuit.
It used to be pre-clearance though. Now it's post.
Right. This does not include pre-clearance like what used to be in the Federal Voting Rights Act prior to the Shelby County decision in 2013. This is all about, you know, outlaying rights and being explicit that there is a private, you know, right of action. So one of the things that's happening with the Federal Voting Rights Act right now is that some plaintiffs are claiming that private citizens shouldn't have the right to bring suits under it, that only the Department of Justice should have the right to bring a suit under the Federal Voting Rights Act. And historically, a very small percentage of Voting Rights Act lawsuits have been brought by the DOJ. Most of them have been brought by private citizens. So if the Supreme Court decides that there's not a private right of action, that will just get rid of the vast majority of voting rights lawsuits under the Federal Voting Rights Act. So the Colorado statute has an explicit private right of action written into it. So there's no debate about that. It's clear in the law that there's a private right of action, which is good.
But it only applies to Colorado maps and things like that, of course, right? Because that's all we have.
Sure. It's a state voting rights act. It's about the state.
Right.
What else do we want to say? Some things I really love about this act. So under the Federal Voting Rights Act, there's a very high bar for bringing a lawsuit. So in addition to gerrymandering, you can bring a lawsuit, for instance, block plurality voting in a city where, you know, if a city has 30% minority population that has never gotten to represent never gotten representation on city council because of a block plurality election system, you can sue to change the system of election. The traditional remedy under the Federal Voting Rights Act has been to go to districts and to draw a district that allows a minority population the ability to elect a candidate from that district. And that's all fine and good if the minority population is geographically concentrated. But if they're spread out across the city and you can't draw a district that has a majority of that population, the districts don't help you. And in the Federal Voting Rights Act, the standards for bringing a case have evolved so that you can't even bring a case unless you can demonstrate that it's possible to draw a majority minority district. In Colorado, this Voting Rights Act is explicit that that is not necessary to be able to bring a case, and that the remedy does not have to be single member districts. And where the alternative voting methods come in is that things like proportional representation with multi-winner elections are explicitly listed as possible remedies for vote dilution claims. And to my knowledge, I don't think an alternative voting method has ever been enforced by courts as a remedy in a Federal Voting Rights Act case. So if that were to happen in Colorado, that would be groundbreaking and awesome.
Wait, I thought it did in Eastland, wherever.
In Michigan, East.
Was it
Hampton,
enforced
East-
by the court, or did the court just say, go do something else and the city chose it?
I thought it was a deal struck between the Justice Department and the city, maybe to
Okay.
avoid a lawsuit or something.
Yeah, maybe so.
What's the name of the city? East, what?
Eastland, I think, and there's
No, it's
also
not
one in
Eastland.
California, in Southern California.
It's not Eastland, but it's something, anyway.
Yeah.
Okay,
The other thing I love about this act, which is very wonky, which is that it includes the establishment of an office, or possibly this will be within the Secretary of State's office, to collect election-related data and retain it to a degree that is not currently done. And this is data that I just want to get my grubby little hands on for analysis, including the kind of racially polarized voting analysis I was talking about. In order to do that analysis, you need election results at a pretty fine level. It's not enough to know just to know who won each county. You need to know who won each precinct. And right now, a lot of that election data is not reported that finely in Colorado. So one of the things this act would do would be to create and retain a lot of really good data for doing an election analysis. There's also a lot in here which I am not particularly expert on, but there's a lot about improved access for members of Native Americans tribes, so tribal reservations, improved access for folks with disabilities, improved language access. So a lot of people have worked really hard and talked to a lot of different groups with different interests. And I think they've come up with a pretty good comprehensive bill, and I'm excited about it. And I really hope it passes without too much disemboweling first.
any other questions for Jen on this? This is great.
There is going to be
It-
a lobby day for this bill at the state capitol on March 3rd. I don't know what time, but that's a Monday. And if you're free that day and would like to go rally in favor of this bill, put it on.
March 3rd. Okay.
I suppose that's a tentative date, but that's the most recent thing I've heard. So stay tuned. I assume more information will be forthcoming from the league about that.
I'm
when-
sure if you're on the league mailing list, you will hear about this. So, okay. We have a couple other things to go through. We've done the main things for this meeting, but I thought I might have an update on the county commissioner elections bill that Rep. Bob Marshall is introducing. I thought he was going to introduce it Thursday of last week, but it hasn't happened yet. I called his office today to get an update. They said, yep, still working on it. I know it's some of the counties don't want to take away local control. They want to be able to decide if they can have 3 commissioners or 5 commissioners. It only applies to large counties. I personally would love the 2 options for electing county commissioners that are offered to be offered to all 64 counties, but that's not the case. The 2 options for electing commissioners are that you can use this STV, sometimes called proportional ranked choice voting. You can use that version, or you can elect all commissioners by district with only the district voters voting. So each voter has a say on only 1 commissioner. And commissioners seem to have opinions about these. They seem to like at-large. They don't necessarily know what proportional is and haven't paid much attention to it. Some of them like being elected by district. Some of them don't like that option. So it's all over the map. And I think that's the only slide. Oh, no. And the league can support this bill as far as we think it's going to end up being in real life, because for large population counties, there are some local leagues that do support the 5 commissioners. We definitely support proportional voting methods, and we oppose gerrymandering. And if you don't have districts, then you can't do gerrymandering. It's great. So you can go ahead and start a conversation with people. It hasn't been introduced, and once it is introduced, we'll read it, and the State League will take a position on the bill. The last thing on the agenda is about local efforts to educate about PR or to adopt PR, and Longmont has a fairly serious effort to adopt proportional representation. RCV for Longmont has been holding community meetings to coalesce around one of 5 proposed options to elect their 6 city council members. The current system, you use plurality, choose 1, or in the 2-winner election, you get to choose 2. All winners get 4-year terms. That part's not changing. At least there might be a transition period, but once the transition period's over, they'll still be at 4-year terms. And they're not planning on touching the mayoral contest at all, which is kind of interesting. Right now it's plurality. And if under some of these systems, the single winner contest would go to instant runoff voting, I think probably they would have the mayor also be elected using instant runoff voting, the single winner form of RCV. So I know there are 2 people on the call from Longmont. You're probably familiar with, you elect 3 from wards in a single winner contest, and you have to live in that ward to elect your ward member. And you elect 3 at-large council members, 2 of them in a 2-winner contest 1 year, and then in the next municipal election, a 1-winner contest. So there are 5 proposed options that people have been discussing, and I think that the 3rd, 4th, and 5th ones are the ones that they like the best because they provide the most proportional representation. And we're running out of time, so I don't know how much we want to go over all these, but okay, I guess I will. So option 1, you have the same elections and terms, but use instant runoff voting for the single winner, and then STV for the sole 2-winner contest, which doesn't give you the proportional representation. And one of the things about single transferable vote is that we don't have the rules yet in Colorado for county clerks to administer it. So number 1 would have the least proportional impact and still require STV rules to be promulgated. So if you're going to go ahead and get those rules promulgated, I think the Longmont folks thought is might as well use proportional representation for more of the elections. Number 2 wouldn't use any proportional representation. They would take the single 2-winner contest and turn it into 2 single winner contests. And they would use instant runoff voting for all those. And then 3, 4, and 5, you would elect at least half of the, well, 3 and 5, you would elect everybody using single transferable vote. You'd either have 2 wards, and each ward would do like Portland, where you elect 3 members at large in your ward using single transferable vote. 5 is like what Cambridge does, except in Cambridge, they elect everybody every 2 years, whereas here you'd elect half the people at large 1 year, and then in the next election, you'd elect the other half of the council members. And then I know one of the organizers is kind of interested in number 4 because you'd keep the 3 wards, so you could still have a ward representative. You'd elect the ward representatives in 1 year, so everybody would get to elect 1, and then the other election year, you'd elect all 3 at-large seats, and you'd use single transferable vote. So the ballots wouldn't look all that different, but 1 year you'd get proportionality, and the other year you'd get district representation. And then there's also a Boulder effort. The city of Boulder, we have been asking the Boulder City Council to study proportional representation every year for the last 5 years. And our county league is quite frustrated because we've gotten barely any response. So in order to increase visibility to our effort, we're collecting signatures. And there's an upcoming signing event on February 13th. From 1:30 to 3:30 at the Brewing Market. So spread the word.
I should say this. So this event is going to consist of me sitting at a table in the Brewing Market and hoping that there's not such a crowd that they throw me out.
I'm not too worried about that.
I'm not too worried about it either. I mean, I would love to get some crowd. We are asking that only people who live within the Boulder city limits sign this petition. But you don't have to be registered to vote in the city of Boulder, and it's not an official petition, so this isn't like official rules. This is just the rules we made up that we want Boulder residents to sign it. And I'm going to hang out there for a couple hours on Thursday. So if you know Boulder residents who would be interested in signing this petition, send them my way.
Sharon Flynn might join you there.
Okay.
I might join you there. I don't know. Okay, great. And I think that's, if anybody knows about other efforts to educate people about PR or to adopt PR, let us know. We'd like to help. And you might want to check out rcv123.org, where you can create your own STV election, or you can go to one that's already been made here. And it's a 3-winner contest. And they've got some good breakfast options, and you can vote and see the results. So I can put this link in the chat, but I think I have to stop sharing to do that. But this is the last slide anyway. So I will put this link in the chat.
There should be a link at the top of your screen to add it even while you're casting.
Why don't I try that? I like learning new things. Okay, so do what?
There's a little, at least in my interface, there's a little tiny menu that you can click on to make it bigger and do things like that.
Make what bigger? Make.
It's a little like drop down button that lets you say, oh, I want to get all those controls I used to have.
I'm just going to put the link in the chat. rcv123.org. You can do that yourself. I don't have to. Well, it's
no, I'm saying while you're.
I understand. I can't do it.
Sharing your screen. Good, you've done it. Thanks. I guess.
I just did it just now, but manually.
Yeah.
Oh, did I? Did it come up?
I don't know.
I think I have to hit. There. Now I've done it. So if you want to create your own, you can go to rcv123.org. So that wraps it up for today. We're going to have a pretty exciting meeting next month with following what's happening with the bill, the county commissioner bill, I think, because the reason the county commissioner bill is so important is that we don't have rules right now to conduct a single transferable vote election. So if this Rep. Marshall bill, county commissioner bill passes, the Secretary of State's going to be obligated to create those rules, which I think is good. And they won't be able to do the risk limiting audit, but they'll come up with a different kind of audit. So thanks for sticking it out, everybody. And I guess I'm going to stop the recording. I think, does N stop the recording? Recording.